I'm sitting in my small apartment, finally at peace with my life, when my phone rings with an unknown number. The voice on the other end makes my heart skip a beat. It is my mother, her voice trembling and desperate in a way I have never heard before. "Maeve, honey, can you please help us?" 2 years ago, I walked away from the house where I was never truly home. Today, the people who once acted like I did not exist are standing at my door begging me to save them. It is funny how life works sometimes. The daughter they forgot about has become their only hope. Before I tell you about this painful yet liberating journey, please let me know in the comments what city you are watching from. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to support me in sharing these real stories. Now let me take you back 2 years ago when I was still that little girl desperately searching for love from the family that was supposed to give it unconditionally. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, our house always felt divided into two worlds. There was Dylan's world, bright and full of possibilities, and then there was mine, existing quietly in the shadows. My father, Robert, worked as a bank manager, always proud to talk about his successful son. My mother, Linda, taught elementary school, but at home she only had eyes for one child. Dylan, who is 3 years older than me, seemed to effortlessly excel at everything he touched. Our house told the story of this inequality better than words ever could. Dylan had the large bedroom with windows facing our beautiful garden walls covered in certificates, trophies, and family photos where he stood center stage. My room was small and dark, tucked away in the corner, furnished with hand-me-down furniture and my few personal belongings. While Dylan took piano lessons, played tennis at the country club, and went on family vacations, I taught myself to play guitar using YouTube videos and spent my free time tending to a small patch of garden behind the house that no one else cared about. The differences became more apparent as we grew older. When I turned 16, it happened to be the same weekend Dylan graduated from college. Our house was transformed into a celebration venue with over 200 guests, professional catering, and a photographer capturing every moment of his achievement. That same day, I received a letter informing me that I had won first place in the statewide writing competition. I remember clutching that letter, waiting for someone to notice, waiting for someone to ask about my day. No one did. While Dylan had his college tuition, living expenses, and later his MBA program fully funded by our parents, I worked part-time at a local coffee shop every day after school to save money for my education. I remember the weight of those long shifts, the smell of coffee beans that would stick to my clothes, and the exhaustion that followed me everywhere. When other teenagers were hanging out with friends, I was behind a counter serving customers and counting tips, dreaming of a future where I might matter to someone. The contrast in how we were treated became a constant reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. When Dylan brought home good grades, which was often our parents would take him out for dinner at expensive restaurants and call relatives to share the good news. When I brought home my report card, which was equally impressive, I was lucky if I got a good job, while my mother continued watching television or preparing something special for Dylan. As I entered college on a partial scholarship, I had earned myself the pattern of neglect only intensified. I chose to study journalism, a passion that had grown from my love of writing, but my parents never asked about my classes, my assignments, or my dreams of becoming a writer. Meanwhile, Dylan's career at a prestigious law firm became the centerpiece of every family conversation. Every Sunday, Dylan would come home for dinner, and my mother would spend the entire day preparing his favorite meals. The dining room would fill with laughter stories about his work and plans for his future. When I came home during breaks, I felt like a guest who had overstayed their welcome. If visitors came to the house, my parents would proudly introduce Dylan, listing his accomplishments and career prospects. When it came to me, I was simply our younger daughter, as if my name and my achievements were not worth mentioning. The day I graduated college with summa cum laude honors was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of my life. I had not only excelled academically, but also secured a job offer from the local newspaper. I had worked incredibly hard balancing studies with part-time jobs, and I was excited to share this achievement with my family. However, when graduation day arrived, my parents were noticeably absent. Dylan had an important client meeting that day, and they felt it was more important to support him by attending some work function than to watch their daughter receive her degree. I sat in that graduation ceremony surrounded by families celebrating their children, taking photos and sharing tears of joy. I watched other parents beam with pride as their kids walked across the stage, and I felt an emptiness that seemed to echo in my chest. When my name was called and I walked across that stage alone, I promised myself that this would be the last time I would expect anything from them. After graduation, I moved into a small studio apartment across town. It was tiny, barely enough space for a bed, a desk, and a small kitchenette, but it was mine. I decorated it with my own photographs, my books, and my guitar, creating the first space that truly felt like home. Despite everything, I still tried to maintain a relationship with my family. I called every week sharing updates about my new job, telling them about the articles I was writing, hoping that someday they might show interest in my life. Those phone calls were painfully one-sided. My mother would answer, but within minutes she would interrupt to tell me about Dylan's latest promotion, his new car, or his recent vacation. If I tried to share news about my work, she would listen with what I now recognize as polite disinterest, often cutting me short to attend to something related to Dylan's life. One of the most painful memories from this period was when my first major article was published on the front page of the newspaper. It was an investigative piece about local government corruption that took me months to research and write. I was so proud of this accomplishment that I bought several copies of the newspaper and mailed one to my parents, along with a note explaining the significance of the article. I waited weeks for their response. When I finally called to ask if they had received it, my mother mentioned that she had seen it but had been too busy helping Dylan prepare for a presentation to read it thoroughly. The breaking point came gradually, then all at once. Dylan's engagement to his college girlfriend became a year-long family obsession. Every conversation revolved around wedding planning, venue selections, and guest lists. I was assigned various tasks to help with the preparations, but I was never considered for the role of maid of honor, despite being his only sister. Instead, his fiancée's sister, whom I had met only twice, was given that honor. On the wedding day, I found myself relegated to the role of a helper rather than a family member. While aunts, uncles, and cousins sat at the main family table, I was placed at a side table with distant relatives and family friends. During the reception, when my parents introduced the bride to extended family and friends, they proudly called her our daughter-in-law, and often added, our only daughter-in-law, as if I did not exist or would never be worthy of bringing someone home to meet them. That night, I went home to my empty apartment and stared at myself in the mirror, still wearing the dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. I realized that I had been hoping for a miracle, hoping that somehow this major family event would make them remember that they had another child. Instead, I had been more invisible than ever. As Dylan settled into married life, my parents' attention became even more focused on his happiness and success. Sunday dinners became more elaborate, and conversations about his career advancement and future plans for children dominated every gathering. I began to skip these dinners, making excuses about work or other commitments, and surprisingly, no one seemed to notice my absence. The final straw came on my 25th birthday. I decided to take initiative and organize a small celebration at my apartment, inviting my parents, Dylan and his wife, and a few close friends from work. I spent the entire day cleaning, cooking, and decorating, hoping to create a warm atmosphere where I could finally feel like I belonged in my own family's life. My parents promised they would attend, and I felt a spark of hope that maybe this time would be different. As the evening approached and my friends began to arrive, I kept checking my phone, waiting for updates from my family. Finally, an hour after the party was supposed to begin, my mother called to inform me that they could not make it because Dylan was having some problems at work and needed their support. I spent that evening sitting in front of my birthday cake, surrounded by friends who cared about me but feeling emptier than ever. After everyone left, I sat alone in my apartment staring at the cake with its 25 candles, and I finally called my mother. Through tears, I told her how hurt I was, how I felt like I did not matter to my own family. "I just wanted one day where you cared about me," I said, my voice breaking. "I just wanted to feel like I was part of this family." Her response was colder than I had ever heard her speak to me before. "Maeve, you are being selfish. Dylan is going through a difficult time right now, and family supports family during hard times." When I asked her what about my hard times, what about my need for support, she said something that I will never forget. "Dylan is the pride of this family, and you just need to focus on taking care of yourself." That night, I wrote a long email to my parents, and Dylan explaining how I felt and why I could no longer pretend that I was part of a family that had never truly accepted me. I told them that I was removing myself from their lives, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. I needed to find people who would value me, and I could not keep waiting for them to suddenly realize I existed. The next morning, I packed my belongings, which were surprisingly few after 25 years of life. I left my house key on the kitchen table and drove away from the house where I had never truly belonged. No one was awake to say goodbye, and no one called to ask me to stay. For 2 years, I lived in complete silence from my family. I changed my phone number, blocked them on social media, and focused entirely on building a life that was truly mine. The transformation was remarkable. Without the constant disappointment and emotional drain of trying to earn their love, I flourished in ways I had never imagined possible. My career took off as I threw myself into journalism with renewed passion. I was promoted from staff writer to editor within 18 months, and eventually I took the bold step of starting my own small communications company. The business grew steadily as I discovered that I had a talent for helping other people tell their stories, perhaps because I understood what it felt like to feel unheard. I bought a small house in a charming neighborhood across town, painted the walls in colors I loved, and created a space filled with plants, books, and natural light. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at home. I developed genuine friendships with colleagues and neighbors, people who appreciated my sense of humor, valued my opinions, and included me in their lives because they wanted me there. I also began dating someone who saw me as the center of his world, not as an afterthought or a supporting character in someone else's story. These relationships taught me what it felt like to be truly valued and loved unconditionally. I learned that I was worthy of attention, respect, and genuine affection. The most important relationship I developed during this time was with myself. I started therapy to process the years of emotional neglect, and I learned to recognize my own worth independent of my family's approval. I discovered hobbies I enjoyed, traveled to places I wanted to see, and made decisions based on what would make me happy, rather than what might finally earn their notice. Then on a quiet Tuesday evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. Something about the timing felt significant, though I could not explain why. When I answered, I heard my mother's voice for the first time in 2 years, but it was different. Gone was the confident, dismissive tone I remembered. Instead, her voice was shaky, older, and filled with desperation. "Maeve," she said, and I could hear her crying. "Please, honey, can you help us? We do not have anyone else to turn to." My first instinct was to hang up, but curiosity kept me on the line. She explained through tears that Dylan's life had completely fallen apart. His overconfidence had led him to make risky investments that backfired spectacularly. He had lost his job, his house, and his marriage within the span of 6 months. Worse, my parents had co-signed loans and used their retirement savings to help fund his failed business ventures. Now they were facing foreclosure on their own home and had nowhere to turn. "We know we have not been good parents to you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But you are our daughter, and we need help. Dylan is living in his car, and we are going to lose everything." After I hung up, I sat in my beautiful living room surrounded by the life I had built for myself, and I felt something I had not expected: peace. Not satisfaction or revenge, but a calm certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. 3 days later, they showed up at my front door. My parents looked older than I remembered, wearing clothes that seemed too big for them, carrying themselves with the weight of people who had lost everything they thought defined them. Dylan stood behind them, looking like a shadow of the confident man who had once been the golden child. They stared at my house, clearly surprised by the evidence of my success. My mother looked around with wide eyes, taking in the well-maintained garden, the beautiful front porch, and the obvious signs of a life well lived. "Maeve," my father said, speaking to me for what felt like the first time in years, "your home is beautiful. We had no idea you were doing so well." I invited them in and served coffee in my sunny kitchen, while they told me the full story of their financial ruin. As they spoke, I watched them with a detached curiosity, like I was observing strangers rather than my family. Dylan barely spoke, clearly ashamed of how far he had fallen from his pedestal. When they finished their story, my mother looked at me with hopeful eyes. "We know we do not deserve it, but could we please stay with you until we get back on our feet? We have nowhere else to go." I took a deep breath before responding. "For 25 years, Dylan was everything to you and I was nothing. When he succeeded, you celebrated. When I succeeded, you did not even notice. Now that he has failed and you need help, suddenly I exist in your world." My father tried to interrupt, but I continued. "I am not angry anymore. Anger would require me to still care about your approval. What I feel now is indifferent. I have built a life where I am valued and loved, and I will not let anyone jeopardize that peace." But I surprised them and perhaps myself with what I said next. "I will help you, but not as your daughter. I will help you as one human being, helping others in need. I will pay for a modest apartment for you and cover basic living expenses for 6 months. But you will not live in my home, and you will not be part of my daily life." My mother began to cry again, asking why I could not forgive them and let them back into my life. I explained that forgiveness and reconciliation are different things. I had forgiven them for my own peace of mind, but I had no obligation to allow people who had shown me for decades that I did not matter to suddenly become important in my life. As they prepared to leave, Dylan finally spoke. "I am sorry, Maeve. We all failed you, and I am sorry for the part I played in that." I appreciated his apology, but I also knew that it changed nothing about my decision. "I accept your apology, Dylan. I hope you find your way to a better life, but my peace is more important to me than your redemption." After they left, I sat in my garden as the sun set, feeling a profound sense of closure. I had spent years desperately trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I had finally learned that my worth was not determined by their recognition, and my happiness was not dependent on their approval. The next day, I helped them move into a small apartment and set up the financial support I had promised. True to my word, I treated them with the same kindness I would show to any strangers in need, but I did not invite them back into my emotional life. Over the following months, my mother called occasionally to update me on their situation and to thank me for my help. Sometimes she would hint at wanting a closer relationship, but I maintained my boundaries with gentle firmness. I had learned that loving yourself sometimes means accepting that some relationships, even with family, are not healthy to maintain. I often think about that scared little girl who used to sit in her dark bedroom, wondering why she was not enough for her own family to love. I wish I could tell her that she was always enough, that their inability to see her worth was their failure, not hers. I would tell her that someday she would build a family of people who choose to love her every single day, and that she would learn to love herself with the same fierce protectiveness. My story is not about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It is about the radical act of choosing yourself when no one else will. It is about understanding that you cannot force people to value you, but you can always choose to value yourself. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who consistently make you feel small, even if those people are family. I have learned that family is not just about blood relations or shared DNA. Family is about the people who show up for you, who celebrate your successes, who comfort you during failures, and who see your worth even when you cannot see it yourself. I found my real family in friends who became my chosen siblings, in mentors who believed in me, and most importantly, in my relationship with myself. The phone still rings sometimes with unknown numbers, and sometimes it is them. But now, when I see those calls, I feel nothing but calm. I hope they are well, I hope they find peace, and I hope they learn to build healthy relationships with each other. But I also know that my peace is not their responsibility, just as their happiness is not mine. If you are currently in a situation where family members consistently make you feel invisible or unworthy, please know that you deserve better. You deserve to be seen, heard, and valued for exactly who you are. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop waiting for people to change and start building a life where you are genuinely loved and appreciated. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from family members for your own well-being? How did you find the strength to prioritize your mental health over family expectations? Please share your story. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories like this one, and share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they are worthy of unconditional love. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings you the same sense of peace and empowerment that living it has brought me. Remember, you are enough exactly as you are, and you deserve people in your life who see that truth every single day.